And then it's tariff, because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back.
To see how these tariffs will impact Japan and Americans buying cars.
Short term, we have to brace for impact. We'll work hard to find a way to overcome these incremental costs.
Those incremental costs at the moment are huge.
Five of Asia's biggest automakers are abandoning the United States. And Detroit, the city once crowned the motor capital of the world, is paying the price. In 2025 alone, more than 38,000 American workers lost their jobs as production lines fell silent and plants shuttered across the Midwest. Families that once relied on steady factory paychecks now face a future of uncertainty and debt. The economic pain is just as brutal for consumers. New car prices have jumped by $5 to $10,000, leaving millions of Americans with no choice but to flood into the used car market, where even decade-old models now sell at inflated prices. Meanwhile, north of the border, Canada is quietly cashing in. The same companies walking away from America are pouring money and factories into Canadian cities, reshaping the balance of power in the North American auto industry. So the question is unavoidable: why would five industry titans turn their backs on what was once the most profitable car market in the world? Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button. A simple like helps push this video to more people who need to see it. And at the center of this exodus, one name stands out above the rest: the automaker that once ruled American highways with unmatched dominance. For decades, it was the best-selling foreign brand in the US, a symbol of reliability and trust. Yet in 2025, that very giant has become the prime casualty of Trump's 25% tariff wall. The numbers tell the story of decline. Losses are projected to reach nearly $19 billion in a single fiscal year, an amount that erases years of growth in one stroke. The company's ambitious electric vehicle expansion, once touted as the future of its North American strategy, has been throttled. Supply chains that stretched across continents are now snarled by tariffs, delays, and skyrocketing costs. On the ground, the consequences are immediate. Market share in the U.S. has begun to erode while customers faced with sticker shock abandon showrooms for cheaper used models. What was once a loyal consumer base is quietly slipping away. Now the brand is weighing an exit strategy. Canada and Europe, with friendlier policies and stable supply lines, suddenly look like safer bets than a U.S. market that once felt unshakable. The former king of the road is learning what it means to be cornered. Still with us? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's next. If Toyota's fall from dominance illustrates the scale of disruption, the Nissan story shows the depth of the financial wounds these policies have inflicted. Once North America was hailed inside the company as the Golden Land, a market where long-term growth seemed guaranteed. But by 2025, that dream has curdled into a nightmare of record-breaking losses. The figures are staggering. A $5.3 billion loss in a single year, the largest in the company's history. This isn't just a bad quarter or a temporary setback. It's a collapse that threatens the very foundation of its North American operations. The retreat has already begun. Production of staple models like the Pathfinder, Murano, and Frontier for the Canadian market has been halted altogether, cutting off a pipeline that once defined the brand's regional identity. Even worse, operations in Mexico, responsible for exporting more than 320,000 vehicles annually to the U.S., now hang in the balance, raising the possibility of an exit that would unravel decades of investment. From being deeply rooted in Detroit's industrial landscape, Nissan has transformed into the most visible symbol of forced withdrawal. A company that no longer leaves because it chooses to, but because the conditions make staying impossible. Hyundai's struggle highlights how Washington's policies cut on two fronts: economics and immigration. Unlike its rivals, Hyundai wasn't undone by tariffs alone. It was struck by a double blow that left both its balance sheet and its workforce in crisis. The financial hit came first. In the second quarter of 2025, the company reported losses of $66 million with operating profit plunging 16%. For a brand that had positioned itself as one of the fastest-growing challengers in the U.S. market, the reversal was sudden and brutal. But the deeper wound came from outside the balance sheet. At its Georgia plant, immigration raids led to the arrest of 475 Korean workers, employees essential to the company's electric vehicle program. Overnight, flagship EV projects were thrown into limbo, and the promise of 8,500 new American jobs evaporated. The fallout reached far beyond factory floors. Families in Georgia were left stunned. Communities dependent on the plant's payroll faced chaos, and in Seoul, outrage spilled into the political arena. The South Korean president was forced to step in, escalating what began as a labor issue into a full-fledged diplomatic crisis. Hyundai's plight revealed something bigger than a corporate struggle. It showed how policy missteps could fracture industries, destabilize communities, and even shake alliances between nations. For Subaru, the American market wasn't just important, it was everything. More than 70% of its global sales came from the US, a level of reliance unmatched by any other automaker. For years that dependence looked like a strength, giving Subaru steady growth and a loyal customer base. But when tariffs struck, that single pillar of support began to crack under the weight. Projections now suggest the company could lose as much as $2.5 billion in fiscal 2026, a staggering figure for a brand of Subaru's size. What makes the blow especially painful is the nature of its customers. Middle-class families who once saw Subaru as the practical and affordable choice are now being priced out. Rising costs have turned dependable models into unaffordable luxuries, pushing buyers toward cheaper competitors or forcing them to hold on to aging cars far longer than they planned. The company's deep reliance on one market left it with limited room to maneuver. Larger rivals can shift investment to Europe or Southeast Asia, but Subaru lacks that flexibility. Its operations and brand identity are so tightly tied to American consumers that diversification is not a quick option. In effect, the very strategy that once made Subaru a success story has become its greatest liability. By putting nearly all its chips on the US, the company finds itself trapped, cornered between shrinking demand, rising prices, and the absence of a clear escape route. Mazda has long been considered a niche brand with a loyal customer base. But in 2025, that loyalty could not shield it from the storm. What once looked like modest insulation quickly turned into vulnerability. Often seen as a niche brand with a loyal following, Mazda might have seemed too modest to attract the full weight of tariff chaos. Yet in 2025 it became clear that no company is small enough to escape. The damage began south of the border. Exports from Mexico to the US, once a vital artery for Mazda's supply chain, collapsed by 54% in just 4 months. Plants designed to feed the American market suddenly stood idle, their output trapped behind tariff walls. The ripple effects spread quickly. Production for Canada was halted altogether, with resources redirected in a desperate attempt to preserve what remained of U.S. sales. But even this pivot offered little relief, as profits continued to shrink under the weight of higher costs and falling demand. Meanwhile, a new threat emerged from across the Pacific. Low-cost Chinese electric vehicles began to flood global markets, eroding Mazda's already thin margins and threatening to push the brand further into obscurity. Mazda's struggle proves a sobering point. In this trade war, survival isn't guaranteed by size or reputation. Even the quietest players can be dragged into the crossfire. For months, the debate around tariffs has centered on corporate earnings and shifting global supply chains. But the most profound consequences have fallen squarely on the shoulders of American families. In 2025, walking into a dealership felt like stepping into another economic reality. Price tags that had once represented years of steady savings suddenly soared out of reach, with new vehicles costing between $5 and $10,000 more than just a year earlier. Even models produced inside the United States, long thought insulated from trade disputes, weren't spared, climbing an additional $3,000 on average. The shock didn't stop at the showroom. Financing a car became its own uphill battle as lenders recalibrated to reflect higher sticker prices. Monthly payments that once fit within middle-class budgets now stretched household finances to the breaking point. For many families, the dream of driving a new car became unattainable, forcing them to settle for older vehicles or to keep repairing aging models far beyond their intended lifespan. That shift set off a chain reaction in the used car market. What was once a more affordable alternative turned into a frenzy of demand. Sedans more than a decade old suddenly commanded thousands above their blue book value, while practical SUVs were gone from lots in days. For the first time in decades, a reliable used car became as much a luxury as a new one, squeezing low and middle-income families who had nowhere else to turn. Meanwhile, the factory towns that supplied the industry are enduring a parallel crisis. As plants closed and layoffs mounted, entire local economies collapsed in on themselves. Restaurants, shops, and schools that depended on a steady stream of auto wages found themselves starved of customers, hollowing out communities from the inside. The safety net of Buy American rhetoric has done little to soften the blow. The result is an inversion of the very promise protectionism was supposed to deliver. Instead of shielding workers and consumers, it has left them both paying more for less, watching as the car, a staple of American independence and middle-class life, becomes a luxury reserved for the few. The cost of that transformation is enormous, and it is a bill no one asked to pay. The retreat of 5 Japanese and Korean automakers has created a vacuum in the U.S., and Canada is moving swiftly to fill it. Ottawa has become the new magnet for capital, technology, and contracts once destined for Detroit. Plants that could have anchored American jobs are now being built north of the border, signaling a shift in where the future of the industry will take root. For Detroit, the fallout is devastating. Once the undisputed capital of global car making, it is now fading into a shadow of its former self. Empty lots and idle factories stand as stark reminders that market leadership is not guaranteed, and prestige can vanish as quickly as investment moves. The world is watching closely. What was once the safest, most profitable auto market has been recast as unstable and unpredictable. And that raises an unsettling question. If the auto industry can crumble under the weight of America first, which sector will be next to fall? This moment isn't just about cars. It's about a turning point for America's place in the global economy. If foreign manufacturers no longer see the U.S. as a safe harbor, what does that mean for other industries from tech to energy to agriculture that rely on international trust and investment? Could this be the first domino in a much larger unraveling? If this video gave you something to think about, like and subscribe to support more content like this. Thank you.